an FBI plane flew round trip from D.C. to Las Vegas, and you attended a UFC fight with Mel Gibson, and I'll show you that. Is that you, and is that true?
Yeah, you want to know the difference? I live in Las Vegas. I'm allowed to go home. I didn't leave a congressional hearing early on an FBI jet to dodge questions.
All right. Then on April 5th, you attended a hockey game in New York City. You don't live there, right?
No, I don't.
By the way, everyday FBI agents who are assigned in Washington don't get to fly home on a private jet.
Well, this is a great point. Do you know why I have to use a private jet? Because Congress made it mandatory.
Well, we didn't make it mandatory that you go to UFC games with Mel Gibson.
Are you telling me I can't go home?
Senator Peter Welch didn't hold back as he grilled FBI Director Kash Patel during a tense Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. Welch zeroed in on Patel's alleged misuse of the FBI's private jet, accusing him of turning taxpayer-funded resources into a personal travel perk for trips to UFC fights and high-profile sporting events. He also slammed Patel's decision to fire seasoned FBI agents tied to critical cases like the January 6 insurrection, framing it as a dangerous move that undermines institutional integrity. With biting sarcasm, Welch mocked Patel's presence at a New York hockey game alongside celebrities, remarking, "We didn't make it mandatory that you go to UFC games with Mel Gibson." The exchange underscored growing concerns about Patel's leadership, ethics, and the politicization of the Bureau.
Just at the outset, I just want to say what I think all of us believe, and that is that the political violence that is so afflicting our country, it doesn't matter whether it's from the right or the left. I mean, all of us have an obligation to fiercely advocate for our point of view. All of us have an obligation to respect people with whom we disagree. The folks we disagree with are our opponents, but they're not our enemies. And I hope all of us keep that in mind and do the best we can to set that example. I want to congratulate the FBI. I want to congratulate the Utah state and local law enforcement for the very good work that it did in apprehending the violent assailant of Charlie Kirk, and that is a terrible, terrible tragedy. Director Patel, at one point you made an announcement that the suspect was in custody. We got our man. It turned out that was not true. In fact, I think that was about 27 hours before the person now in custody was apprehended. Why did you make that statement?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you letting me address this. What the FBI does is not just locate and find suspects, but we also participate in eliminating subjects. And what we had at the time was a subject in custody in relation to this investigation. So in my commitment to work with the public to help identify subjects and suspects, I put that information out. And then when we interviewed him, I put out the results of that. And could I have been more careful in my verbiage and included an A subject instead of subject? Sure, in the heat of the moment, but I was doing the best I could.
In all candor, I don't quite get that, because if we have our man, that would suggest to the public that everybody can rest and relax and not then continue to provide information to local law enforcement and to you. Well, so that was a mistake.
I don't see it as a mistake. I see it as something working with the public to identify that there was a subject in custody.
If you put out a statement that says we've got our man, and in fact it turns out that you didn't have your man, that's not a mistake?
But that's not what I said.
Well, I'll go on. That's my understanding. A second thing that is really important in the FBI, but it's important in every agency, is that the folks who are doing good work get supported for the work they're doing. And a number of highly successful FBI agents have been let go. And I want to just ask you a little bit about that. You know who Brian Driscoll is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And my understanding is he served at the FBI for over 18 years. You agree?
I believe that's accurate.
Special agent in charge of the Newark office. He was commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team. That's a very prestigious and responsible position, correct?
It is.
Section chief of the Critical Incident Response Group's tactical section. You've got to be pretty good to get that high responsibility. You agree with that?
Yes, sir.
He oversaw 55 SWAT teams, and they're like the elite of the elite, right? They they go in to the dangerous situations, right? He got a Medal of Valor for his participation in a raid on ISIS terrorist Abu Sayyaf, who had kidnapped American citizens Kyla Mueller, right? Mueller? Is that right?
I know.
You're in agreement, right?
I know Kayla Mueller's family. Yes, I know this.
Okay, and he got Kurt Meyer, somebody who had barricaded himself in a bar after he killed 4 people and wounded 2. And Driscoll was part of the team that went in there and took that guy out, right?
I don't have all the details, but I'll take your word for it, Senator.
And he got into trouble when Emil Bove demanded a list of FBI agents who investigated January 6th and was apprehensive that what did happen ultimately would happen, and that is those folks would get fired. I mean, do you agree with me that a boss who stands up for his subordinates when they did the job that was asked of them is a stand-up person and somebody to be admired?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
Pardon me?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
But Driscoll got fired, right?
Again, that matter is under litigation, and the matter you referenced occurred before I was
Okay, but
director.
let's just keep it fairly narrow here. He's fired, right?
Yes, he was terminated.
And he has to be, there's somebody communicates to him that he's terminated, correct?
That's my job.
That's your job. So you communicated to him that he was fired.
I did.
So, you know, I have a hard time with this because that record suggests to me that this person is like worthy of consideration for the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he got fired.
But there's also a record of other information that was available, and now that this matter is pending litigation, we will get that out in due course. But as
Okay,
you
so
can
the
agree.
so-called, so you've got, quote, other information that you see as a valid basis to fire somebody who, from what I can tell, had an absolutely outstanding record and who crossed the threshold of getting in trouble because he was standing up for agents serving under him who did work that was assigned to them that happened to be related to the January 6th uprising.
Again, you're correlating based on your information the reasons for his termination, and I'm telling
No,
you.
that's right. Let me ask you another question. You know, when you were here, you were rightly critical, not here actually, I guess it was on Kash's corner. You were rightly critical of the way that the previous FBI director used the FBI jet. And you said you wanted to ground Chris Wray's private jet travel that he pays for with taxpayer dollars to hop around the country. Let me ask you this. You know, on the weekend of, according to flight tracker data, on the weekend of March 7th, an FBI plane flew round trip from D.C. to Las Vegas, and you attended a UFC fight with Mel Gibson, and I'll show you that. Is that you, and is that true?
Yeah, you want to know the difference? I live in Las Vegas. I'm allowed to go home. I didn't leave a congressional hearing early on an FBI jet to dodge questions.
All right. Then on April 5th, you attended a hockey game in New York City. You don't live there, right?
No, I don't.
By the way, everyday FBI agents who are assigned in Washington don't get to fly home on a private jet.
Well, this is a great point. Do you know why I have to use a private jet? Because Congress made it mandatory.
Okay. In April 5th, well, we didn't make it mandatory that you go to UFC games with Mel Gibson.
Are you telling me I can't go home?
You know, you got to use some judgment here.
So when I'm at
Beth,
home,
you
I
would-
can't do what I'm doing when I go home. Everybody else is allowed to go home,
Let
just
me
not
keep
me.
going. No, I'm glad you go home. I
Okay.
love to go home, but I don't go home on a private jet. On April 5th,
They're not mandated to do so.
You attended a hockey game in New York City with Wayne Gretzky, and Flight Tracker says the FBI jet took you to and from New York City, where you don't live, right?
That's correct.
And on April 12th, on the following weekend, you attended a UFC a fight in Miami, also on the FBI jet, right?
That's correct.
So what's the cost to the taxpayer for those 3 flights?
But I pay the commercial equivalent per the regs and the law. And so just so you know, when you are comparing me
I
to
just
prior
asked
directors.
I asked what the cost was, and you don't know. I take it.
Yeah, and what I've done with the use of the private jet is use Andrews Air Force Base versus
Okay.
Reagan National as what the other directors have done
Bottom line
to
here.
save the taxpayer
Bottom
dollars.
line here, you flew home to Las Vegas. There's nobody else in the FBI who gets paid. They have to pay their own way if they want to go home, right? I mean, right?
Well, that's not accurate. Depending on where you're stationed, the FBI covers the bill to get home.
So are you telling me that FBI agents who are assigned in Washington, but who may live in Charlotte, they get paid by the FBI to go
Sometimes
home?
they do, yes.
Right. Another thing I want to say is this. You know, our local law enforcement has been stiffed. About $500 million in cop grants have been taken out of the budget. Those really help us in Burlington. They help us in Rutland. They really are important. And why in the world would we be cutting those cop grants when we need that local law enforcement, in part to partner with you?
Well, I
Do
think
you
you're
support that?
I think you're speaking to the Department of Justice grants, which I don't adjudicate, but also Vermont, just like every other state, has received a plus-up of FBI personnel.
Well, I'll tell you, that's not what we're seeing. The other thing, my understanding is that there's a requisition or an effort to get another plane for the FBI that would cost about $72 million. Is that right?
That's inaccurate. The FBI, because the jet, as you call it, is not my jet. We use it for operational needs. We use it for FTOX. We use it for HRT.
But that's the one you fly in, right?
We have multiple fixed-wing assets, and one of them is on a wildly expensive lease that I deemed a waste of money, and I'm looking for a replacement in which the government can procure assets permanently.
Well, I would welcome you submitting to this committee the cost information about the jets that are under consideration. And according to our research, the specifications that are included in this request would result in an expenditure of between $72 million and $80 million.
That's
So
inaccurate, but I'll happily get you the right
I
numbers.
welcome getting the specific information.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The high-stakes Senate hearing opened with a solemn warning about the dangers of political violence, as senators emphasized that while fierce debate is essential in a democracy, opponents must never be treated as enemies. That set the tone for a tense confrontation with FBI Director Kash Patel over a series of controversies that cut straight to the heart of trust in law enforcement. One flashpoint was the violent assault on Charlie Kirk, where Patel prematurely announced that the suspect was in custody, even declaring, "We got our man." Senators blasted this choice of words, arguing that it misled the public and could have discouraged additional tips in a fast-moving investigation. Patel pushed back, saying that a subject had indeed been detained and questioned at the time, but lawmakers stressed that in high-stakes cases, language matters, credibility can be lost with just one misstep. The scrutiny then shifted to Patel's decision to fire veteran Special Agent Brian Driscoll, a decorated officer with nearly 2 decades of service who had led hostage rescues, counter-terrorism raids, and SWAT operations. Senators painted Driscoll as a loyal agent punished for standing up for colleagues who investigated the January 6 attack on the Capitol, while Patel insisted there were other factors behind the termination, though he declined to reveal details due to ongoing litigation. This exchange raised an even deeper question. Is the FBI cracking down on whistleblowers, or are its internal decisions rooted in legitimate but undisclosed concerns? From there, the focus turned to Patel's use of FBI jets, with flight records showing trips to UFC fights in Las Vegas and Miami as well as a hockey game in New York. Lawmakers demanded to know why taxpayers should cover such travel when ordinary agents receive no such perks. Patel defended himself by pointing out that Congress requires the FBI director to use government aircraft for security reasons and that he reimburses the government at commercial flight rates. But senators argued that mingling with celebrities at sporting events hardly looked like essential FBI business. To them, it spoke to a larger issue of privilege, accountability, and the perception of elitism within the Bureau's top ranks. The hearing closed with growing frustration over cuts to local cops grants, critical funds that help small communities partner with the FBI. Patel noted that these grants fall under the Justice Department's control, not the Bureau's, but the exchange underscored a widening tension between federal and local agencies over resources at a time when violent crime, extremism, and cyber threats are surging. Taken together, the marathon hearing was about more than Patel's words, travels, or decisions. It exposed the fragile trust between Congress and the FBI, raising difficult questions about transparency, fairness, and the balance between national security and public confidence.